This is a video about how to use the quadratic formula to solve a quadratic equation. So the quadratic formula is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So the first step that we're going to do to solve our first problem here is to make sure that we are in the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. And you can see that over here, we have it equal to 0, we have an x squared, an x, and then a number. Now we are going to identify a, b, and c. Now a is always before the x squared term. So if I'm looking here, there is nothing before the x squared term. So that number is 1. So we have a equals 1. Now b is before the x term. So in this case, we have negative 5. And c is the number without any x's. So in this case, c is negative 10. So after we have identified a, b, and c, we put it in the quadratic formula. So the quadratic formula is written here in that third step. We have x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Now my recommendation is that every time you replace a letter with a number, so every time that you're substituting, you put that number inside parentheses. So let's start here on the first one. I like to kind of write out a template of what I'm doing, and then go back and fill in the numbers. So the first thing that I have is negative b. So I'm going to be putting this b term, this negative 5, in this position. Now, like I said before, you want to make sure you do that with parentheses. Then we have another b underneath the square root. It's b squared. So once again, in parentheses, I'm putting that negative 5 squared. Then it says minus 4 times a. A was positive 1. Once again, make sure you put that in parentheses. Then we have c. C is our next letter, so we're going to take that negative 10 and put it right in there for c. And then at the bottom, you have another a. So take your a, which was 1, and put that at the bottom. So I've plugged in my numbers. Things are color-coded, so hopefully you can see that. Now, there is a trick to this next step. To simplify this, you want to simplify the part out in front of the plus or minus. So we need to simplify this negative 5. Negative 5 makes it a positive 5. Then you have plus or minus. Keep the square root there. And we are going to simplify what's underneath the square root next. Do not include the square root into your calculation, just what's underneath. So what I mean by that is in Desmos or your calculator, put in parentheses negative 5 squared minus 4 parentheses 1 parentheses negative 10. Put that in the calculator and then put it back underneath that square root. So if you want an example of what that looks like, go into Desmos, we have parentheses negative 5 squared on the outside of the parentheses minus 4 times 1 times negative 10. Right? And we get 65. So I take that 65 and I go back underneath that square root. Then we are going to divide it by, and we need to simplify the bottom. Pick a color I haven't used, pink, 2a. So that's here, 2 times 1. Well, you guys know 2 times 1 is just 2. And I apologize for this first one. I should have made that yellow, but then maybe you couldn't have seen it. So my exact answer is x equals 5 plus or minus the square root of 65 divided by 2. So that's our exact answer. Now remember, whenever we have this plus or minus, that's right here, that means that we need to split our answer. So that's our fourth step, split your answer. So we're going to have one answer that has the plus in it. So x equals 5 plus square root of 65 divided by 2. Then we're going to have x equals 5 minus the square root of 65 divided by 2. You can put those in Desmos or a calculator to get your approximate answers. So in Desmos, you hit the fraction button, 5 plus square root of 65 divided by 2. Then do it again, but plug in a minus. Use your 3 places after the decimal. So here we got 6.531. And then the other side was negative 1.531. So those are your approximate answers. So exact, approximate. All right, now we can follow the same steps and do problem B. So the first step is to make sure that we get it in this form, ax squared plus bx plus c. So it is in that form because I went x squared, x, a number, then it says equals 0, which is really the key. That's what I'm looking for. Now we need to identify a, b, and c. Well, remember that a is the number before x squared. So I have a equals 3. B is the number before the x, so that is 10. And c is the number without any x's, so that is 6. Then I put those in the quadratic formula, so I'm going to write it out. So every time there's a b, which is here and here, I'm going to replace that with 10. Every time that there is an a, which is here and here, I'm going to replace that with a 3. And every time there's a c, which is just right there, I'm going to replace that with a 6. Now remember that when you're doing your replacing, to put those things in parentheses. So I'm going to write that out real fast. All right, after you've plugged in your numbers, then you want to simplify. So you have 3 pieces. You have the piece out in front, plus or minus the square root of something else, divided by something. So let's see if we can fill in those boxes. So the first part I'm going to simplify is the part in front of the plus or minus sign. I have negative 10. This is just negative 10, so you keep it. Let's see if I can write in yellow, just like negative 10. I'll retrace that in like a gray so that way you can see it. But that's where the yellow thing went. Now we simplify what's underneath the square root. You do not put the square root in the calculator, just what is underneath of it. So in the calculator, I would put in, parentheses 10 squared minus 4 parentheses 3 parentheses 6. So put that in the calculator. You get 28. And then we just have to do that bottom part. 2 times 3. Well, we know 2 times 3 is 6. So now we have filled in the quadratic formula. If you're taking your quiz on Canvas or online, this is what I would like you to type in. Oops, not the X. Just fill in the boxes with those numbers. Now to get your approximate answers, remember you have to split these apart. One with a plus, one with a minus. Put it in Desmos. So negative 10 plus square root of 28 divided by 6. You would put that in Desmos and you would get approximately negative 0.784. Then when you would do your negative answer, right, the minus answer, negative 10 minus square root of 28 divided by 6, and that is approximately negative 2.548. You can put those in Desmos to get those. Let's try 2 more problems. Let me see if I can copy and paste our steps here. So we have our steps. We want to copy those to our next page. That way we can see them. So our first step, remember we want it to be in this form, ax squared plus bx plus c. So I have the x squared, I have an x, and then we kind of get a little bit stuck because it's supposed to be equal to 0, but it's not. So what you have to do in this case is subtract 6 on both sides. You use a different color here, subtract 6 on both sides. So then we get 5x squared plus 3x minus 6 equals 0. And that's what I'm looking for. I want that to be equals 0. So now we are going to use this equation to plug that into the quadratic formula and get our answers. So once again, identify A, B, and C. A, the number before x squared is 5. B, the number before x, which is 3. And C, the number without any x's, is negative 6. So we have our quadratic formula. Plug in the A's, the B's, and the C's. Just kind of writing out my template here. I'm going to plug in the A's. The A was here and here. Remember to put it in parentheses. Put the B in parentheses. And lastly, put the C in the equation. Don't forget your parentheses. Let's do the setup that you would probably see on the quiz, which is a box plus or minus the square root of another box divided by a box. So what goes in each of those boxes? So in order to do that, you have to simplify. Remember, negative b, so that's the part in front of the plus or minus. So in this case, I have negative 3. So I'd put that out in front here. That's a -3. You can't see it. There it is. Then you have the part underneath the square root. Put that in the calculator. Remember, you're just putting in what's under the square root, not the square root itself. So when you put this in the calculator, you should get 129. And then the last part that you need to do is the denominator, which is 2 times 5, which is 10. So we got our quadratic equation all set up. Now we just need to split them apart to get our approximate answers. So I'm going to split these apart. Remember, one has the plus, one has the minus. You should put those in Desmos, and when you do, you get your approximate answer. And that takes care of our third problem. Now we only have one more to do today, and I want to make sure that we do one where we have a -a. So if you're looking at the packet, put a negative right there in front of that 2. We'll do it one of these with a -a. All right, so first thing, when I kind of look at this, something doesn't seem right. Remember, it needs to be in this form. It needs to be equal to 0. So I'm going to subtract 3 on both sides. And that gives me -2x squared plus 9x minus 3 equals 0. So for the rest of the problem, please use this form. Now we're going to identify A, B, and C. A is the number before x squared, which is -2. B is the number before x, which is 9. And C is the number without any x's, is -3. So we're going to put that in the quadratic formula. I'm going to do my b's first, which are here. So it's going to be x equals -b, which was 9, plus or minus the square root of 9 squared, minus 4. Then we have our a. Our a is -2. That's here in the formula. Then we have our c, which is there. C was -3 divided by 2 times A. A is -2. So all I did was substitute in A, B, and C. We have to simplify. So let's come up with our boxes. That way we know where to put everything. Something plus or minus the square root of something else divided by something. So we're going to focus our attention on what happens before the plus and minus first. I have a -9. Then what's underneath the square root? 9 squared minus 4 times -2 times -3. Just put in what's underneath the square root in the calculator and you get 57. And lastly, you do the denominator. 2 times -2 is -4. So I have my answers. I just need to split them apart now. and find the approximates. I'm going to split them apart over here. So one is x equals -9 plus square root of 57 divided by -4. The other is -9 minus the square root of 57 divided by -4. Put those two things in Desmos to find your approximate answers. That's 0.362. Another one, you get 4.137. So that takes care of all of our examples about the quadratic formula.